Maybe?
Nope.
Uh-oh.
That's the wrong screen. So for our presentation is 75 minutes left.
Welcome to our session, Bringing a Mac Admin's Mindset to Managing Windows Endpoints. We're two endpoint engineers from Thumbtack. If you've never heard of Thumbtack, it's a modern home management platform. We help people care for their home from top to bottom. That's just like a little marketing speak that they wanted us to put in here. So if you have any questions during the presentation, raise your hand and we can pass you the catch box. There is a QR code on every one of these slides. If you want the URL without scanning, it's github.com/internal-thumbtack PSU Mac Admins 2023. The QR code is going to take you to a link to our slides and then a lot of the resources that we referenced during this. And it's also a GitHub repository that has some things like PowerShell scripts and things like that in there.
I'm Adam. I am the lead endpoint engineer at Thumbtack. I live and work in Whitestone, Ontario, and someone's scanning, so I should stand aside, because we put it in the wrong side, apparently. I live and work in Whitestone, Ontario, which is a small town a few hours north of Toronto. I've been working with Macs professionally since 1998, and I've been working in IT since 2006. And I've been here at Thumbtack since September.
My name is Rebecca. This is a picture of me with my dog Scully. If you're on the Mac Admin Slack, you've probably seen a lot of pictures of Scully because I post her all the time. She was immensely helpful in getting this presentation set up because I practiced this for her about 100 times. She didn't have very good questions though. I'm a little bit newer to the IT world. I've only been in IT for about 10 years. Most of that is working with Macs. I've also been at Thumbtack since 2022. And since our company is fully remote, I live in the middle of nowhere, up in northern Minnesota in a really small town called Virginia. So for our agenda, we're gonna go over who this is for and who this is not for, why you would wanna do this, what Windows management with a Mac admin mindset actually looks like, and how you would go about it.
So let's start with who this is for. This is really for Mac admins, hence we're doing it here at Mac admins. It's for Mac admins who are managing a small number of Windows devices, but your Macs are your priority and the largest number of devices you have. We are also hoping, like, if someone's here and they're looking to add some Windows devices, that this presentation will be good for you. Then the next question is, who is it not for? And that's if you consider yourself a Windows expert, because we are not Windows experts. You might be laughing at us if you think that if you are expecting Windows experts in this presentation. There will be definitely big things that we miss because we're talking about this from the Mac admin point of view. So then the next question is, who are we? And we're an org that's primarily Mac OS. We've got a large chunk of Chrome OS devices as well. We have only one department, and it's not a big one that's using Windows machines. But we still want to give them the care and attention that we give to the Macs to those Windows machines to make sure that they are supported and they have what they need to do their jobs.
What is your percentage breakdown? What is your percentage breakdown between Mac and PC? Just curious. And you talked about Chrome too.
I don't know what the percentage breakdown is actually off the top of my head. I want to say that we're at about 1,000 Macs and maybe 24 Windows machines.
I think it's a little bit more than that. I think we have about 50, but.
And also, first question. I brought some Canadian stuff.
It's from Canada.
I've never heard of it.
So that's a good question and a good breakdown of our devices. So in addition to that, we're also managing Chrome OS, we're managing Linux, we're managing BYOD devices, but none of that's in the scope of this presentation.
So why? Why would you want to subject yourself to this? It feels like Mac OS users and admins have kind of won the fight. Mac OS is accepted. We're all here today because of that. So if you already have a great job, you're managing Mac OS, you love Mac OS, why would you want to subject yourself to Windows? And this is not an exaggeration. Our CFO, his name is Larry, he's a really cool guy, and I have a great relationship with him because I've been able to solve a lot of his weird little Windows problems. A lot of people in the past have kind of dismissed it, said like, it's Windows, we don't really want to deal with Windows. I've actually taken the time to really look and research and figure out some of his problems, and we have a great relationship now. And allowing people to use their tool that they like to use, it also makes people happier and more productive. And if anybody wants to know his weird problem that he had, that first time was Windows wouldn't update. And it turned out that there was a really old version of Cortex XDR that was blocking it. But yeah, taking the time to actually research that, it made a huge world of difference to him. But there really are applications where Windows is better, and there are things on Windows that you just can't do on Mac OS. Just like we've been arguing for years that Mac OS is better for things and IT should let us use our choice of OS, Windows is the same way. It really is tailored to more things. Even in cases where you technically can do something on Mac OS, if a person is better at doing it on Windows, they're more efficient, we want to enable them to be able to do that. Just an example, Excel. So this is why finance usually argues to have Windows machines. And that's the case for us. Our finance department is using Windows. There are things like VBA macros that just aren't the same. If we have an absolutely incredible finance person coming in and their job doesn't necessarily rely on them using Power Pivot, but that's what they're used to and that's what they're good at, we don't want to get in their way. This one's you.
Oh. So yeah, the question is, do you really need Windows? And there's a lot of organizations where the answer is no. Because there's a lot of tools that can get you where you need to go. So you can run VMs, you can run AppStream, which is part of AWS, which allows you to run apps in the cloud. In the past, a long, long time ago, there was a program called Wine, which allows you to run Windows applications on Linux and Mac OS devices. And we had a student database at the school I used to work at, which only ran in Windows. So what we ended up doing was we installed Wine and installed that application on that one device. She got everything working, set up how it was meant to be, packaged it up, threw it into Monkey, and distributed it to the people who actually needed it. And that was a solution to get us that one item that we actually absolutely needed.
Yeah, so why not just hire a Windows guru? And obviously, in a perfect world, we would do that. In this world, we have to keep our team lean. We're in a world where budgets have been cut, there have been layoffs. We need to adapt, and it just doesn't make sense in our organization. Like you asked, we don't have a percentage of Windows users that's high enough that we would want to hire someone that specifically just does this. So we do what we can. We learn and we grow, and we try to support those Windows users as best we can.
So what is a Mac admin mindset? We think it comes down to these three items, which is that we value simplicity, we practice curiosity, and we strive for perfection. And maybe one more thing, we deal with software update issues. So let's look at simplicity. There's the famous commercial that Jeff Goldblum did for Apple where he was unpacking a Mac, and it was you plug it in, you get connected, and there's no step 3. There's no step 3. And sure, that's really, really, really underselling what there is, but that's what Mac users want. We want simplicity, and we've wanted it since 1984. Mac OS, from its core, has always been striving for that simplicity. And one of the things that I love about Mac OS is that the UI directs us where we want to go and understands how humans interact with computers rather than imposing how the computer wants you to interact with it. So that's the user side. Then there's the Mac admin side, which is we want to keep things simple for the end user. We want to reduce friction for them. And we hope that we can make using a managed Mac computer a better experience than using an unmanaged computer. Because we can get rid of extraneous PPPC pop-ups that come up. We can get rid of notifications from apps that abuse notifications. We can allow list system extensions and get them installed for them, ready to go, without bugging them about it. So all these things in a managed Mac environment help us make using a Mac better. And we choose Mac OS for these reasons. Windows, on the other hand, it's not simple. There's a lot of pop-ups and options. There's an intimidating array of options that let you do anything possible, but you have to know what you're looking for, and they're extremely verbose and don't really tell you what you want. And one example of that is, I don't know if you've ever edited a PDF, where on your Mac you double-click on the PDF, it opens up in preview, you click on the edit button, and you edit it. On Windows, you have to find a program and hope it's not malware, because there's a few thousand programs to choose from. You have to install it. You have to associate the application to run PDF files. And that kind of stuff is what we can do as admins to make the Windows experience better and get us closer to that simplicity. The other one is curiosity, which is exemplified by my first cat, Calvin, there, back in, I think, 2000 or 2001. macOS users are curious, and we like to poke around and see what is available in the operating system. We want to find out what we can do, and we also like little things that show up that direct us there. So I don't know if you've held down, popped up a contextual menu in the Finder, and you held down the Option key, and suddenly copy changes to copy full path. And then suddenly you have on your clipboard the path to that file, which is such an amazing thing that is just a delight when you find it. Windows, we find that your curiosity isn't reward, it's kind of punished. If you try to do something weird on Windows, you might not let it boot anymore. And then finally, perfection. And I don't think anyone here will say that macOS is perfect. But I think that we all value perfection. We want an out-of-the-box experience that delights us as a user. And for Mac admins, we hope that we can cater that out-of-the-box experience to direct them and to instruct them and help them find the way and the information that they need. We want the ability to tweak things so that we can get it closer to our high expectations. And with Windows management, we can do that. We find it's further from perfection than macOS, but we can get there with management. So my question to you is, what do you value in macOS? Anyone? Okay, no one values anything in macOS? Yeah, I get it. Oh, let's pass this guy.
I value the Unix underpinnings of macOS.
Me
Yeah,
too.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got one more throw for you.
Boy.
Nope. And we got a question in the back, if you could pass the catch box.
Back to Millie.
My throwing is about as good as my catching.
That was my fault on the throw. Too short.
What I wanted to share is that what I value in macOS is that it's the operating system that allows not only the user or the admin to do their job, but because it's so simple, it takes the problems out of the way so that you can start using the tools, whether they're installed by the admin or by Apple, in a way that maybe was unexpected. That's where you really get the wonderful aha moments. So I appreciate what you guys are doing here with your approach to Windows, because I think that's possible in that space too.
Who
Yeah,
wants to be a relay?
absolutely. Well,
I should not be throwing.
Security.
Security.
Yeah.
You just wanted candy. Oh, you already got
he already
one.
has a candy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got one. Lots of tools
Lots of
Lots of
tools.
tools.
that are open source.
Yes,
Open
open
source.
source tools
Yes.
are a fantastic part of Mac OS experience.
So what about Windows? Sorry.
We have a couple more.
Is there more?
Well, I was just going to say that as a visual artist, I really appreciate the clean GUI of Apple and the fact that when I install something, it doesn't throw all kinds of crap on my desktop.
Absolutely.
Recently, I'd say excellent hardware quality.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Oh, and a third.
Everybody wants candy.
No? Oh. Built-in PDF annotation.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, let's carry on to.
We're gonna run out of candy. Oh, one more?
No, this is for Windows.
Oh, okay.
That unlike the Mac OS, Windows has a top-to-bottom, fully implemented, fully supported automation framework that, unlike Mac OS, Windows has a top-to-bottom, fully implemented, fully supported automation framework that doesn't require you to stitch 33 environments together with 5 different languages. And it provides a really good stepping stone into higher level programming, C#, that kind of thing, which Apple is completely missing the boat on. And Windows dev docs are way better.
That is one thing. Yeah, I didn't cover that in the presentation, but yeah, I would agray with you there. Windows documentation
We told
is
you experts
generally
aren't.
pretty good. Yeah, we don't want experts here. But one big thing about Windows is that it's kind of in a state of flux right now. So on the one side, you've got kind of the old school Windows admins that used SCCM. They manage on-premise labs. They had everything bound to AD, and they managed things through group policy. On the other side, you've got Microsoft that's kind of trying to play catch up with the things that Google and Apple have done. The tooling that those old school admins are using might not be updated to kind of use the newer system. These were great tools in the old days when we didn't have a remote workforce, when we didn't have mobile devices to work with, when everything was on site. In 2023, it's just really in kind of a weird state. So if you're trying to figure out how to do best practices with Windows, it's really tricky right now because you're going to have one contingent of people that's saying SCCM is all you need. You're going to have another contingent saying like Autopilot is the way of the future. You need to use InTune for everything. You need to figure out how to use Windows line of business apps. It's just really messy right now. One thing is that, yeah, we've kind of talked about this. It's hard to be curious in Windows. Licensing is super complicated. It's really hard to figure out what hardware to get, what management solution to use, and how to configure things. And another note too is that Microsoft loves to change the names of things, so it's always like really hard to Google things. Is it Intune or Endpoint Manager, Azure AD or Intra ID, SCCM or Configuration Manager? Even Microsoft kind of goes back and forth in their documentation. So you'll be reading an article about Endpoint Manager, and all of a sudden they'll start referring to it as Intune. So it's really tricky to kind of keep track of what is what.
And one of those, Entra ID, Azure AD, they changed the name of it a week ago. Right. We had already started this long before then, and suddenly there's a name change.
Right.
They're trying to emulate Google with changing the product name.
Right. Yeah, and learning Windows can be really difficult. Most of the guides that I found when I was kind of tasked with starting to figure out how to manage Windows devices were the other way around. So they were from the point of view of Windows admins that were forced to manage Macs. And I couldn't really find anything the other way. So that's kind of why we did this presentation. It's really interesting. I actually recently found out that that's kind of how this conference got started, is that it started with trying to get their Windows sysadmins to understand how Macs worked better. So we've kind of come full circle there.
So let's talk about how to Windows. This is going to be a bit of a crash course in getting set up with Windows devices in your environment. So obviously you need hardware. As Mac admins, we know that it's really easy. You go to Apple. We haven't had to deal with Power Computing or any of those other companies that made Mac clones since the 1990s. So it's been pretty easy. And Apple now doesn't make any Windows-compatible hardware. Boot Camp is dead. Intel is dead. We are in this ARM world now, and you can't use Apple hardware for this. Yes?
This reminded me of another reason why I love Macs, Apple stores. And you guys talk about having all remote users. It's so nice to be able to tell a user, like, who's remote, go to the nearest Apple store and get this thing fixed.
Yeah.
So,
Exactly.
and no PC company has retail stores.
No, there were Microsoft stores for like 6 months, I want to say. I remember there was one in the Toronto Mall that was like right beside the Apple store, and it was empty, and the Apple store was jam-packed. Yeah, that worked out great.
How soon we forget Gateway Country.
Gateway Country, wow. Yeah, that's taken us back. Well, I guess I've been doing that a bit with nods to power computing. But yeah, there's no simplicity in Windows hardware. We've found that Lenovo is right for us. I can't say it's going to be right for you, but they make pretty decent hardware. They seem to work. They've got reliable warranties. And there's another thing. The warranty is coming from the hardware manufacturer, whereas Apple manufactures the hardware and the software, and thus they warranty it. I had an experience when I was at a school where we had purchased a laptop for every single teacher. It was a Dell laptop. And the extended warranty expired 3 years later. And we were trying to push them to extend the warranty for free because we asked them for a complete list of all repairs. And the list of repairs was longer than the number of computers we had. So Dell, they're fun. I will never buy Dell again because of that. Also, Windows laptops tend to come in different flavors. There's budget, there's gaming, and there's business. I assume if you're here at a Mac Admins conference, you're probably looking for business machines, and that's where Lenovo falls in generally. And another thing that Lenovo has is a limited matrix of products. So it makes it easier to figure out what you need to get rather than, oh, there's 800 different variants of this computer. Do I want a Power Mac 9600 or a Power Mac 9500 or a Power Mac 8600 or as you might remember from the 1990s. Then there is licensing, and licensing might be the worst part of it all. If you ever look for information about licensing, you're going to find that there are thousands of opinions. There are so much questions and answers about how to license Windows. For us, we've found that Microsoft 365 Enterprise E3 is right for us. It includes Windows, it includes Azure and or Entra ID, it includes Office, it includes Intune and or Endpoint Manager.
Yeah.
And so that seems to be the right solution for us, and you still have the catch box, so yeah, go for it.
Is that just for PCs, or are you buying E3 for Macs too?
No, we're not buying E3 for Macs. I believe we have some extra licenses for the users who want Microsoft Office, but generally our primary is Google's Office Suite for those purposes. Yeah, and I think that even the experts in licensing get confused. So it's not you coming from the Mac world trying to look at this. It is just that Microsoft has done a big failure of getting that working. We've got a link up there. It's also on the GitHub, M365 Maps, which is, I don't want to say good. I'm even reluctant to use good-ish, but it's the best we found of how to explain licensing with just maps of what they do and what they give you, and it is confusing. But that's a resource.
So management. So now that you've actually bought your devices, you have your licensing figured out, you have to figure out how to manage these things. The good news is that MDMs all basically function the same, whether it's Mac OS or it's Windows. You have your centralized management system. In our case, we're using InTune because that came with our E3 license. And then there's a client that lives on the endpoint that's communicating with that centralized management system. There are a ton of Windows MDMs out there. There are so many. A lot of them kind of work the same. Probably the two that are most common are going to be Intune and Workspace ONE. Jump Cloud is getting there. It doesn't quite have the same features as the others. But the main thing to focus on with this is that you really don't want to focus, like a lot of organizations do, in getting an MDM that's going to be good at both Mac and Windows. For the most part, they're good at Windows or they're good at Macs. You don't want to try to combine if you can. I mean, a lot of places have limitations where that's kind of what they have to do, and that's fine, and you can manage Macs and Intune, but it's not the best experience. And another note about SCCM, because I've brought it up a lot, and if you've looked up Windows management, you probably know about SCCM. It is Microsoft System Center Configuration Manager, also known as Config MGR in some of the documentation. And that's kind of the old school way that people used to manage all of their Windows endpoints. It's still around. It's still a good complement to your MDM, but I would not recommend in 2023 using that as your only MDM. It requires an on-premise server that you're managing, and like the interface is really old. It's not the best tool in 2023. I would highly suggest getting something like Intune and using SCCM on top of that if that's the route that you want to go. And configuration. So when we set up our configuration for our Windows endpoints, we actually created a spreadsheet of everything that we're doing on Mac OS and how we wanted to try to mirror that on the other systems. And that spreadsheet is actually linked in the resources too. So this included things like managing updates, installing applications, and configuring security settings. So a major goal is to hit those goals that we talked about. We want to keep it simple. We want users to be rewarded for their curiosity instead of punished for it. We want to put guardrails in place so if they get too curious, they're not breaking everything. And we want to get it as close to perfect as possible. And if you remember, we talked about setting a PDF editor on Windows. This is where you can kind of bring some of that simplicity and perfection into Windows. There is another link in the resources that'll show you exactly how to do that. I won't go into it because it's very complicated and it's kind of bonkers, all the things that you have to do, but it is possible. You can use the app installation to actually pull down the PDF editor that you want to use. And you can do this crazy process with getting setting it on a test computer, getting the base 64 value of that, and actually deploying it through Intune. So it is possible. And just some Windows concepts. So this is the part where Windows experts are going to laugh at us. Because if you come from a Mac OS background, there's probably things that are pretty basic that you just don't really understand. And I'll go ahead and say it, I didn't understand. That's why I made these. So this is just a really simplistic way of kind of mapping Mac OS concepts to Windows concepts. So they don't completely translate, obviously, but these are kind of the same idea.Plists you're going to be using for editing preferences. In the Windows, you're going to use the registry for that. That's just one example. We're going to be going over all of these things later.
So let's start with plist versus registry. So both those functions control behaviors on the device. It's just whether you're using a plist or you're using the registry. They're both stored in binary, but one is individual files, the other one is a confusing mess that no one really knows how it works. You can manage settings for the user, for the computer, or the system level. It's with the registry, however, it can become corrupted. And that can cause the whole system to fail. Unlike plists, which are modular, registry entries can be built on top of each other. Registry entries are built on top of each other like a skyscraper. So if something goes wrong on one of it, all the other layers that are on top come crumbling down with it. And yeah, that's the big difference with registry. It's managed with a program called Regedit, which has been on Windows as long as I can remember. I don't know when it started coming, but you just click on what used to be called the Start menu and click on Run and type in Regedit, and it'll pop up for you. It can also be managed through PowerShell, similar to how you can manage plist through Terminal, and it can be managed through MDM as well. Packaging.
Yeah, packaging. So I want to say that there is a great session coming up tomorrow at 3:15 on using AutoPackage for Windows that I will be attending because we don't yet use AutoPackage for Windows, and I would love to learn how. Our workflow for packaging is pretty similar to what we use for Mac OS. We generally are getting package files from the vendor. In Windows case, it's going to be MSI files. And we use those pretty much the same way that we would use a PKG from a vendor making a Mac OS application. MSI is the proprietary format that Windows uses. It's really similar to a PKG in that you're putting files down on the system. You can use it to put registry files in. Windows also has something called DLL files. It can use DLL files too. So there are other packaging types out there. Win32 is one that you're going to hear a lot about if you're looking this up. So Win32 is applications that are actually packaged with the extension .intune win. And those are used a lot by package managers like Chocolatey. We don't personally use Chocolatey. We just don't have enough Windows endpoints for that to make sense. So we just use MSIs. If you want to keep things really simple for yourself, you can only ever use MSIs, and that's fine. Win32 apps are kind of, they offer a lot more control, but they are a lot more fussy to do. You're gonna have to repackage things. Another big limitation is that Win32 apps and MSI apps should not be used together if you're using Autopilot. They're delivered to the machine through two different methods. Win32 apps are actually using, like, I hate to compare this to Jamf, but this is kind of like how I keep it straight in my head. So Win32 are going to be installed by basically the Intune version of the Jamf binary on the machine. So it's actually a binary that's installing these. The MSIs are kind of like how we would use VPP apps. So that's actually coming down through a different channel. So if you're using Autopilot with Intune and you've got them coming through these two different channels, you can get errors and you can get failures. So you pretty much have to pick one or the other that you want to use. So MSI is what I would recommend. There are also file types. Like I said, like all of this is in a state of flux right now. Microsoft is just constantly coming out with new things like MSI X, which is basically an MSI with extra options. UWP may or may not be deprecated depending on the year of the article that you're reading. And what UWP is, is a Windows Store app. And it's kind of similar to how we use like Mac App Store apps. In theory, they're great. You add them, they stay updated. In practice, not so much. The main thing is that they were kind of created when touchscreen devices started coming out. So they're sort of this weird halfway point that are supposed to be able to be used on mobile devices and also on Windows. But they don't always work for that. So a lot of times the UWP version of an app doesn't have the same features that a Win32 or an MSI would have. And Autopilot. Autopilot is great when it works. It's so much like ADE in the end user experience. And that's kind of what they were going for. So the idea is that you buy your devices from a reseller, they add them to your MDM, you set up Intune. As long as they're online when they turn that computer on for the first time, they're going to get prompted for their credentials, for Azure AD credentials. And I'll go over that when I go over the Azure/Intra. But you don't actually have to manage the users through Azure. We have it federated with Okta. But the person is going to be signing in with their Azure credentials, and it's the same kind of as ADE. They're going to get any profiles that you want. They're going to get that whole out-of-box experience. Hardware. So if you come from a macOS world, you're probably not really used to dealing with hardware issues, and you are going to have to deal with them when you're dealing with Windows. It's kind of the Wild West. You're going to have to deal with hardware issues that are at the manufacturer level instead of things that are actually at the Windows level. You're going to have to deal with things like drivers and errors, and my personal favorite, beep codes. If you have used a Windows machine in the past, you've probably encountered some kind of a beep code where you turned it on and it was like 3 short beeps. And so you looked it up and you said, Lenovo ThinkPad 3 beeps at startup. And you found out that it was like a RAM issue or whatever it might be. Beep codes are very different now in some cases. So I have a little video. This was sent to us by one of our users. Right, exactly. How do you Google that? Right. Yeah. Google 8-bit song when I turn on my computer. Like, how in the world do you do that? So apparently, Lenovo did this to make it easier. What you're supposed to be able to do in theory is open up the Lenovo PC Diagnostics app on your phone and hold it up to the speaker, and it will tell you what that is. I tried this, and it didn't work at all. It didn't find anything. I thought that maybe this was happening because I was on an iPhone. So I had an old Android phone laying around, and I tried to do it on an Android, and you can't even get the Lenovo PC Diagnostics app anymore because they pulled it from the store. So if you get a beep code like this, your best bet is to just contact the manufacturer. Use that extended warranty. Throw it in a lake. Or a lot of laptops, like this particular one, the way that we fixed this one is that Lenovo ThinkPads actually have an emergency reset button that you can hit with a paperclip, and it'll reset the whole thing. Nothing else we tried worked, but that actually worked on this one.
It disconnects the battery, is what happens. It's the only, so even when you power it off, it's never actually powered off. So when you hit that.
Sorry, could you?
Oh, yeah, good call.
So when you put the paperclip under the underside, what it actually is doing is disconnecting the battery, and it's doing a full hard reset. So even when you shut the device off, it's still on. There's still power going to it. And that does happen. Like if you have people who suddenly their dock doesn't work or their USB devices, paperclip.
Nice.
So I'm going to drop a bunch of links that I have from Lenovo because we have a good relationship with them, and we have like 4,000 devices.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Keep that with you.
Okay.
And then it's closer to people at the back.
Yeah, it's like a hardware PRAM reset.
A hardware PRAM reset.
Hardware PRAM reset. Yes, exactly.
Did you ever diagnose
Well,
or figure out what the actual? Did you ever diagnose or actually figure out what that issue was?
We still don't know. We had to get him back up and running, so we didn't really spend a lot of time on it. We just did the reset, and he was able to get back to what he was
You
doing.
should remix that into a simple program.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yes.
You tell your internal customer to hum a few bars. And
Right.
pick it apart later.
Yeah. Well, because that was what the original ticket was. Just like my computer's making a weird sound. We were like, well, what kind of weird sound? He's like, it's playing a little song. We're like, okay. So he sent us the video, and we're like, oh, okay, it really is making a little song. I get it. Got to. I'm trying to advance. It's not
yeah,
working.
there we
There we go.
So PowerShell. PowerShell is one of the best parts of Windows. And I don't mean that in a sarcastic way for once. It will help you get closer to the perfection that you desire on your endpoints. We currently use it for things like setting VPN application settings, turning on Chrome browser management, enabling BitLocker. In the past, I've used it to import AD users using a CSV, which you can't do or you couldn't do until PowerShell existed. PowerShell is basically like the terminal for Mac. It's better than the command prompt that was built into Windows since day one, or what I like to call DOS. It's very user understandable from a English speaker perspective. Copy item does, it copies the item. And start job starts a job. Format list formats a list. And rename an item, or rename item, renames an item. It's really pretty straightforward and easy to understand. And the documentation is surprisingly good. If you want to play around with it, you can actually download PowerShell for Mac. It will let you connect to an AD server or to Azure, and you can manipulate your existing infrastructure on your Mac using PowerShell, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah, so this is kind of my experience of the Windows community and trying to find answers to questions. So the Windows community is very large, but it is not nearly as supportive. And probably a big reason for that is the history. So a lot of what I've wound up doing in researching this presentation is kind of looking up the history of it. Mac OS and Windows are just very different. So when there were fewer Mac OS admins out there, we kind of had to like band together and figure things out together. And there's a camaraderie and there's kind of a level of respect among each other. Windows communities, there are so many of them out there, and they all just kind of assume that you know what you're doing and you've always known what you're doing. Because of that, if you have a problem, you have a much easier time finding somebody that has the same problem, but they're probably less likely to want to help you. There are communities out there. There is a Windows Discord. It's not officially a Microsoft resource, but it is there. It's primarily for home users. It's not really for admins, but it's a resource. There is a sysadmin channel on there. When I've gone on the sysadmin channel, though, most of the discussion is about licensing. So just kind of like a little contrast. So this is how I see like the Mac OS community. You know, we're all like helpful and we like each other. There's a question. I don't know where the box is.
Gentleman in the white hat.
So just on that Discord, there is a separate Discord for Windows admins. I just put it in the chat.
Is there really?
Yeah, so they're for like InTune or Endpoint Manager. I think they switched it back to InTune. But yeah, there is
cool.
One of those. And then I did have a question regarding like some of the PowerShell scripting that you guys use. I see in the GitHub that you guys have that you're using PowerShell scripts to create an administrator account and enable BitLocker. Mm-hmm. Is there a reason that you guys aren't using the configuration profiles since you have the E3 license? I mean, those are, in my experience, a lot more reliable.
I think we actually have switched to that. And that PowerShell script was just in our private GitHub, and we were looking for PowerShell examples to throw in there. But yeah, that was one of the first projects I did on the Windows side when I got here. Got to Thumbtack, was to get BitLocker up and running, and that was how we did it. Cool. And that was the last bit of candy.
Oh no! No more questions.
Yeah, you can still ask questions, but
only people that have candy can ask questions.
Right. Yeah, thank you for the tip on the Windows Discord.
It's useful. I've used it too. So.
Cool. Very cool.
So managing updates, and I seem to get all the happy talks, the PowerShell and now Windows Update, because it works. It actually works. They have this thing, which I have no idea why it's called it, but it's called an update ring. I don't know why it's a ring, but it's a ring. And basically you can use that to set up all the settings that you want to do and you want to send out to your devices. Tell it where to grab the updates, what channel to grab, and it sends it out and they actually update. It is that simplicity that we want. It is that perfection that we want. Windows updates actually work. But then there's Azure.
Yeah. So kind of as we're kind of wrapping up here, there's kind of a question that a lot of people have on whether or not you need Azure /Intra ID. And the answer is that yes, you kind of do. The basic reason is that if you're using Autopilot, you're using InTune, you're scoping things to users, Intune needs to be able to read the user information from Azure. We don't actually use Azure as like an identity provider. We're using Okta. You can also federate it with Google. I'm sure there's other things that you can federate it with, but that's the two that I know of. So what we're actually doing with Azure is that we have an Okta application for Microsoft 365, and we're assigning that to users. So when someone signs into Azure, they actually get the Okta login. So during Autopilot, they're logging in with their Okta credentials. On the back end in Intune, it's assigning that to the Azure user. But Azure is pulling all of the information in from Okta. So we're not actually managing any users in Okta. We're not creating, modifying, deleting, doing anything at all in Azure. That's really all that we're using for.
And with a Mac admin mindset, you can manage any endpoint. It doesn't have to be Windows. It can be Chrome. It can be Linux. I'm going to go really slowly because that clock says 30 minutes.
Oh, no.
So yeah, Chrome, Linux. It cannot do Commodore 64s, unfortunately, I don't think. Good luck managing that. But yeah, we believe that with this mindset, you can totally manage any endpoint.
Yeah, so you kind of want to just keep those ideas in mind. So simplicity. So no matter what endpoint it is, you want to keep the experience as simple as possible for your users. You want to make sure that they're able to do their job without the operating system that they're using getting in the way. You want to have the experience of using a managed endpoint to be even better than the experience of using a non-managed one. Curiosity. You gotta allow yourself to be curious when you're looking these things up, because a lot of times we kind of have a block in our minds. I don't work with Windows. I don't know anything about Windows. You gotta let yourself be curious. You gotta look that stuff up and figure out, this is how I would do that other thing on Windows. And you also want to empower your users to be curious. You don't want them to be getting into trouble. You don't want them to be getting so many pop-ups that they're clicking on that they don't know what they're actually clicking on and they're installing malware. And perfection. You want to get the experience as close to perfection as possible and then tweak it even further. So that is the end, and I'm sure there are going to be questions.
Where's the catch box at? That gentleman had his hands up first.
Yeah.
Are you using anything for reporting across multiple OSs? Or are you using just your MDMs?
Yeah.
Not currently. We are looking at a few options. We were just talking with Fleet about that.
Yeah.
Just yesterday evening, we just...
I do not work for Fleet. I'm not trying to sell you anything. I was just curious.
Yeah. But yeah, there are options that we haven't begun doing. It's all siloed in the different MDMs. And that's not ideal. But it is where it is. And let's move over to you, because you're right beside him. The
Real
catch
quick,
box
so
is there.
you guys are using Intune for Windows. What are you using for the Mac side?
Jamf
Jamf.
currently.
Jamf, okay.
Yeah.
Never mind, he just asked my question.
I'm curious, last time I was here, Rich Troughton did a session, and he said at SAP, we're doing day one support for Mac OS, and that's our preferred OS. The minute it comes out, we're going to support it, and we're going to push all of our machines to it. And my mind was like, psh. So, and I did it. We run the latest OS the day it comes out, and it hasn't, the world has not ended. I'm curious if you do that on your Macs, and what do you do on your Windows? So like, or do you have a testing group, or are you doing any of the so one of the ways we do it is we've implemented a group that runs the public betas, so that we're doing the testing before day one. So just curious what your mindset is on day one support for Windows releases.
Come to our
Great
talk on
question.
Friday.
Yeah.
On Friday, we're doing a talk called Beta Buddies, Testing with Friends, which is about our macOS beta testing program. Now, we're not getting pre-release versions of Windows like we're getting pre-release versions of macOS. And as such, we are not testing new versions of Windows. Also, No one in IT is using Windows as a daily driver. We all have, of course, test machines. So our testing on Windows is limited in a sense where we have mission critical apps such as our firewall or our endpoint security tools, where we are rolling them out into small group, bigger group to everyone. And that's just through user groups in Intune, how we're doing that. Yeah, I want to pass the catch box.
How are you handling new users or new employees who come on and say, you know, I want a Mac, I want a PC? Is that like a fully open choice, or are you restricting it? How do you handle that?
So we go by department. So based on what department a person is in. The only one that really kind of has a choice is our developers. If we have a developer that comes in and says, I am an absolutely hardcore Windows person, I can only use a Windows machine to use my job, we'll get them a Windows machine. But generally speaking, the only people that we're officially giving Windows devices to as a rule is the finance department.
Do you see that changing in the future? Or are you pretty well happy with the way the Mac deployment's been?
I don't think that that's something that we're going to change. And also, I'm going to add a caveat to that I don't think we've ever had anyone come in and ask for Windows.
We have.
We do have 4 engineers in our developers who specifically asked for Linux. So that's why we manage Linux for those 4 users. And we've had people in our customer success department and sales who have requested Macs rather than Chromebooks, to which I believe the resounding response is no. But I don't think generally if anyone's getting a Mac, unless they want Linux, they want a Mac. So we've been lucky with that. We also haven't had anyone ask for a Mac in finance, I don't think.
No.
Yeah.
I love that change.
Yeah.
Just when I started working in IT, everyone wanted a PC.
Mm-hmm.
And now everyone's like, well, what about the shiny Apple stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to pass the box over to the end.
Sorry, I'm gonna steal real quick because I have
Yeah,
a question.
we got time.
For sure.
You said you were buying Lenovo. Are you buying it directly from Lenovo or through a third party?
I think CDW.
CDW, we buy everything
Yeah,
through.
and
Yeah.
the advantage of them is there is CDW US and CDW Canada. And then we also, I don't know where we're buying from, but we also are in the Philippines. So we're purchasing in 3 locations.
Yeah, and the good thing about CDW too is that you have a 1-year warranty through CDW. So we don't actually even buy usually the extended warranty on things because we haven't needed it.
Yeah.
You kind of already answered my question before. It's like you said that none of the IT staff is using a PC as their daily driver. How much of the Windows side admin stuff do you end up having to go to a Windows machine or a VM or something like that to actually do? Because it seems like all the stuff that I've done has been a web app or some kind of a SaaS solution. I can do that in Chrome or Safari on my Mac. How much do you have to actually go back to Windows to do other than testing something?
Not very often. I'd say maybe once every couple of weeks I have to fire up my Windows machine and figure out some weird thing a problem that someone's having that I can't figure out,
And I think that you're doing more of that support side. I find that I only touch my Windows machine once every few months to maybe more frequently, like once a month as testing and only testing. So everything, I download Chrome, the latest MSI, once a month on my Mac, upload it to Intune, test it out on my test machine. But yeah, all these stuff that I'm doing on my Mac because that's where I'm happier.
So you guys are using Intune and Autopilot, you mentioned, right? How zero touch or light touch do you find that is? Like, what's the rate of sort of success or failure in that onboarding process, provisioning process, versus how you're doing your Macs with Jamf?
We've had pretty good luck with it, honestly. I've heard horror stories from other people. I think in the time that I've been there, we've had one user where it didn't work. And we had to go in and troubleshoot and figure out other methods. But yeah, we've generally had pretty good luck with it. And I don't know why. I don't know if it's because our Intune environment is really simple. But yeah.
And when we had, I got an older Windows machine as my test unit, so once that was shipped to me from the Toronto office, I turned it on, I plugged it in, it worked. There was nothing to it, it just was pretty much the experience that you want to have.
Autopilot's pretty nice.
It is. Yeah.
There was a question at the back. Do you still have that question? Yeah.
Hey, got it. You mentioned chocolatey, and we have about the same amount of PCs you do, and chocolatey can handle like any installer that can be run silently. So if it's an EXE or whatever it is, as long as you can run it silently with command line switches, chocolatey can handle it. I don't work for chocolatey, by the way. we just happen to use it, and you mentioned it. And
Yeah.
chocolatey, you mentioned auto package, the auto package session, which is really cool. And I hope that that's something they can do. But chocolatey kind of negates the need for auto package because chocolatey reaches out to download, package, like auto package will kind of reach out and push packages into something like your monkey repository.
Right.
But chocolatey will reach out and download those kind of on demand. So it's a little bit of a different paradigm.
We looked at that when I started. We looked at chocolatey because I'd used it at a private school maybe about 7-8 years ago. And it was a great program. It was basically what I wanted with auto package and for the Windows side. I had the experience of auto package. We ended up going with what we did because we are keeping a pretty light touch, so we're not throwing too many packages on the Windows machines. And then I was surprised to find out that chocolatey does cost money because when I was using it, it was free, or I was stupid and didn't know that I should be paying for the enterprise version. And I can't really get away with that in a larger corporation.
Unless it's changed, which it might have, but there's a free version, but that just uses community packages. The paid version, you can host your own packages, basically. That's my understanding.
Oh, okay. I was under the impression that if you wanted to use it in a commercial setting, you had to pay. But yeah, I'm glad to know that that's not the case. So maybe we will look into that.
So I'm the one giving the auto PKG session for
Oh, cool.
Windows software. So
Yeah. Yay.
I hope you show up and ask that question then. But I will say that chocolatey is like a tool that you can use auto PKG to generate chocolatey packages for. And a lot of the chocolatey packages are actually built by hand by people, and they're not actually automated. And you can use auto PKG to automatically create those chocolatey packages. And then there's a set of about like 350 chocolatey packages that are automated in a similar way to auto PKG recipes by like the chocolatey maintainers in like an unofficial capacity. And then there are like random people doing the same thing. And it's almost identical to like how AutoPKG works, but AutoPKG I find easier to work with and more extensible. Where it's a lot of like haphazard PowerShell on the chocolatey side.
So it's like auto packages working like auto packages on a Mac, and then it's going into chocolatey like monkey on a Mac.
Well, I'm not using chocolatey, but you can use chocolatey, and I have used chocolatey as the destination for AutoPKG, but AutoPKG can use a destination that is anything. Like it could be SCCM, it could be BigFix, it could be chocolatey, it could be, any tool.
What are you using?
BigFix.
Okay, never heard of it.
That's where I work. So.
Oh, okay. Can you get us a license?
Yeah. There's a question up front. Yeah. Oh.
Are you pushing it? Can it be pushed into InTune?
No.
No.
That's a competitor of ours.
Yeah.
But you can.
So also, and a lot of people don't know this, chocolatey does have the enterprise version C4B, chocolatey for business. It's agent-based, you pay by the agent. It does a lot more. For example, you can set up your own software store with it internally for people to install.
Okay.
You can do it by groups. You can auto push out updates with it. Where I work, I'm IT adjacent. I'm in the engineering department. We have a lot of very weird applications that mainline IT doesn't support because there's like 4 people using it, but without those 4 people, things don't happen.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So I was looking at that for a while. So you can use chocolatey for that. We found a better way around. We just, when we need things in SCCM Software Center, we hand them the entire PowerShell installer.
Oh, cool.
And they just go, oh, okay, cool, click, click, done. So that worked out for us. I'm also the guy giving the PowerShell on macOS session later today. But yeah, there's in terms of Windows, what I find bites people the most is that macOS is more forgiving of a lack of preparation. If you forget a detail, you'll probably be fine. On the Windows side, if you forget a detail, little mushroom clouds start appearing and you are going to not be happy. So with Windows, the big thing is you have to be very diligent. You have to document everything. If you do that, like Autopilot, I've had really great experiences, then I've had experiences where I forgot something and it just barfed everywhere. I had to redo the whole thing. So that's what I think catches a lot of people off guard is Mac OS management is a little bit more forgiving of forgetting a minor detail here and there, and Windows is definitely not.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for the PowerShell for Mac. That's actually how I learned PowerShell. It was by attending that JNX session.
So I assume you guys have a remote workforce.
Mm-hmm.
How are you guys managing time zones through Intune?
I guess we don't really. I don't know.
You guys let the user set it and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they're in their own time zone. They know where they are. I don't.
Is that something you've had difficulty with, or?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, really? Okay, interesting.
What kind of experiences, like we got time, so what kind, unless people want to plunge, what kind of experiences have you had that have caused issues with that?
Oh, just people traveling and it not auto-updating.
Oh.
So have to do a proactive and remediation script that, gives location access and all that kind of stuff. So.
Yeah, we are spread across North America, and we're spread across, only in one time zone in Asia, but that's, how many time zones? 5, 6 different time zones?
Yeah.
So we haven't had an issue, but by just leaving it and letting them do as they please.
Yeah, generally speaking, we have a pretty light touch management-wise for all of our endpoints.
Which we think is part of the Mac admin mindset, is keep a light touch, only manage the things you absolutely need to.
I want to thank you, Rebecca, for saying don't try to find an MDM that does Mac and Windows. No offense to FileWave. If anybody from FileWave's in here. That's been my experience too. Let the MDMs be the MDMs for the best one for Windows, the best one for Mac, whatever. But I had another question about, I mentioned when I came in this session that I missed Bonjour for Windows because it made setting up printers so easily. And I remember that, there used to be Safari for Windows too, that was great. But I'm curious, do you do anything like that where you kind of shoehorn a Mac experience onto Windows? The best thing I can think of that I still do now is AirParrot, which allows you to AirPlay from Windows, which is so much better than anything else on Windows. So.
I think that we don't because we are remote first. So if we were putting an infrastructure where we had Apple TVs everywhere, which we did at my school I used to work at, we had an Apple TV in every room with a smart board, and then everyone had AirPlay. But there was one teacher who refused to use a school-owned computer and was using a Windows device, as much as I was saying no. Though my successor did fix that and got her working properly. But I threw AirParrot on her machine because she had that capability. But we're not working with a set type of devices because everyone's office is going to be different. So we don't have any hardware that everyone has to adapt to. Awesome. One more.
Right.
Well, we can have more of that.
I'd like to second what you said about not trying to have one product that does management for both platforms. I've worked with Case and PatchLink and BigFix, and none of them have feature parity across the platforms. So, and I don't know of any that started as MacAdmin tools and then went the other way, but I'm sure that would be the same experience, just in reverse. So.
Yeah, I have experience having used VMware's Workspace ONE and made the move to Mosel because it just wasn't a great solution for Mac because it really isn't designed for Mac. And you call their support and they're like, well, press the start button.
Also, I'd like to add that the Lenovo musical tunes.
Yeah.
So Apple used to do that back in the 90s. So in fact, I think I have a demo here. Let me try.
Really?
All right, so this is a Macintosh Quadra. Here we go. All right, that's what you get when you have an error on a Quadra. But then they decided to get fancy. Here's a Quadra 660 AV. Let me turn that up.
Whoa.
Honest, I used to hear this all the time. and then here's my favorite. This is the Power Macintosh 6100, which I'm sure somebody thought was funny. Yeah, thanks. That didn't panic my users at all.
Behind you.
Yeah.
So I feel like the market for Apple management solutions is pretty small. Like everybody knows Jamf, Kanji's starting to become a bigger player. Like we kind of know what that field looks like. When we look at Windows solutions, I feel like there are dozens of them. There are just so many. So how do you evaluate Windows solutions? I'm sure it's fairly similar to evaluating an Apple management solution, but how do you find like the best product essentially for what you're trying to do? Because I feel like actually pinpointing a solution in a field that's so large is more difficult than it would be for Apple stuff.
Yeah, definitely. Reaching out to the community is something that's a big one. There's a Windows channel on the Mac admin Slack. I've asked a lot of questions there.
Did InTune was already decided before you arrived at Thumbtack, right?
Right.
Yeah, so that was there before we all arrived. I just bought a new car and I felt that exactly what you're describing. There's just way too many options. But yeah, I know that Rebecca and our director were talking about the possibility of Workspace ONE to amalgamate into one MDM system, and I kiboshed that as soon as I arrived. Yeah, we haven't done that browsing. We've looked for a Linux system, but again, there's very little options, and none of them seem to work. So we ended up not doing that and just throwing that into Intune, of all things. So I don't know how you look for a Windows one, but there is a hand up, and maybe you know.
I guess polling the room, does anybody like their Windows management solution that's not Workspace ONE, not Workspace ONE, and not Intune?
Ooh.
I work there, so.
What was
Good
the name of your
answer.
company again? Big Fix?
Big Fix.
Okay.
This
Gonna get
session's
that on the
sponsored by
mic so
Big
people
Fix.
watching at home.
Yeah, yeah.
As for Mr. Big Fix, I understand Big Fix is getting into the Apple MDM space too, correct?
Yes.
That was a yes.
Cool.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I kind of disagree with the guy saying there are not a lot of MDMs for Mac. I mean, there's 5 on there, and Mosul's not even on there. And so there's, I can think of 5 or 6 more that aren't on there. So.
I think it's growing. Yeah. Whoa.
So you said you had 4 Linux users. How do you manage them?
We're actually managing them through Intune right now, and it's not great. We needed to have some kind of management solution in place for them, so we stuck them in Intune. It's not good.
It's basically just scripts to tell us if they're in compliance or not. Do we have the remediation stuff set up yet? I don't.
So we have custom compliance scripts right now. That's it. Yeah.
And so, yeah, we can also, there's only 4 people, so if they're out of compliance, we can nudge them and just say.
Yes, we do Linux as well.
Let's talk.
Right. Yeah. No? Okay.
All right.
Is there anything else?
Lunchtime?
All right. Wow.
Thank you, everyone.
Yay. I'm clapping for myself.
Yeah.